Velith lay on the cold, cracked ground of the battlefield, her small body trembling. Smoke filled the air, and the sky above was dark with the remains of burning ships. Her people had left. They had abandoned her. She could still hear their voices in her head, their last words before they fled. "She is injured. She will slow us down. Leave her." She had cried out, begging them not to go, but they had not even looked back. Velith belonged to the Xelari, an advanced alien race that considered themselves superior to all others. Their bodies were tall and elegant, their minds highly intelligent. They never showed weakness. Weakness was shameful. And she was weak. Her left leg was broken, a deep gash running down her thigh. Purple blood leaked onto the dirt. Every breath she took was painful. She tried to move, but her body refused. The sound of footsteps made her heart race. Not Xelari footsteps. These were heavier, rougher. Humans. Her people had told her stories about them. Barbaric creatures, full of rage and destruction. They were nothing but beasts, using violence to solve every problem. Velith felt her body stiffen in fear. She had seen humans in battle before. They were terrifying. They fought like animals, with no fear, no hesitation. They never backed down, even when outnumbered. Her people called them savages. And now, they were coming for her. She tried to stay silent, to make herself smaller, but it was too late. A shadow loomed over her, a human soldier. He was tall, covered in thick armor, and carrying a weapon on his back. His face was dirty, but his eyes were sharp, focused. He crouched down, inspecting her injury. Velith squeezed her eyes shut. This was it. This was how she would die. But instead of attacking, the human pulled out a small device, a medical scanner. His brow furrowed as he looked at the readings. "You're hurt bad," he muttered, more to himself than to her. Velith opened her eyes slightly. His voice was deep, but not harsh. There was no anger in it, only concern. Another human approached, a woman with dark skin and short hair. She glanced at Velith, then at the man. "Lieutenant Carter, what do we do?" Carter, that was his name. Carter sighed. "She's injured. We take her with us." Velith's eyes widened in shock. "Take me with them." Why? Her people had left her to die. Why would these humans care? The woman hesitated. "She's Xelari. What if She's a person," Carter interrupted. "And she needs help." Before Velith could protest, Carter carefully slid his arms under her, lifting her off the ground. She gasped in pain but didn't struggle. She was too weak. As he carried her toward a human transport ship, Velith felt something strange inside her chest. Confusion. Her people had taught her that humans were brutal, that they had no mercy. But this human, this savage, had shown her kindness. Maybe everything she had been told was a lie. Velith felt weightless as Carter carried her into the human ship. The air inside was different, warm, metallic, and thick with the scent of oil and something burnt. The walls were rough, built for function, not beauty. It was nothing like the sleek, silver halls of her own people's ships. Her body ached, and her vision blurred from pain. But her mind was sharp. Every nerve screamed at her to escape, to run. But where would she go? She was injured, alone, and surrounded by humans. Carter laid her down gently on a medical bed. The moment he let go, she tried to sit up, but her body refused to obey. "Easy," Carter said, holding up a hand. "You're hurt. Don't move too much." Velith flinched at his voice. She was not used to humans speaking in such a calm tone. Weren't they supposed to be loud and violent? A human medic approached, pulling on gloves. She was a young woman with brown hair tied back in a messy bun. Her uniform was stained with blood. Not Velith's, but human blood. She had been treating others before this. Another one. The medic sighed, looking at Carter. "Didn't think you were in the business of rescuing enemy soldiers, Lieutenant." "She's not a soldier," Carter replied. "She's just a kid." "Kid?" Velith almost frowned. She was not a child. She was over 20 cycles old, young for Xilari, but not a child. The medic scanned her wounds and let out a low whistle. Legs broken. Nasty cut too. I don't know much about alien biology, but I'll do my best. Velith stiffened. She didn't want their help. She didn't trust them, but she was too weak to stop them. The medic picked up a strange-looking tool and pressed it to Velith's wound. A sharp sting made her gasp, but then, relief. The pain started to fade. Numbing agent, the medic explained, should make you feel better. Velith's heart pounded. Was this some kind of trick? Some slow-working poison? She looked at Carter. He had removed his helmet, revealing a tired face, short dark hair, and a fresh scar running down his jaw. He didn't look cruel. He didn't look like a savage. Why? She finally spoke, her voice hoarse. Carter raised an eyebrow. Why what? Why help me? The question made the room go silent for a moment. The medic glanced at Carter, curious about his answer. Carter sighed and leaned against the wall. Because you were left behind. Velith's throat tightened. Yes, she had been left behind. Her own people had abandoned her without hesitation. Humans shouldn't care. They were supposed to be ruthless warriors, only looking out for themselves. That's what she had always been told. But Carter continued, his voice softer now. We don't leave people behind. Velith stared at him. That phrase, those words, felt foreign to her. The Xilari never thought like that. If someone was weak, they were left behind. It was the way of survival. The medic finished wrapping her wound and stood up. She should rest. The medicine will keep the pain away for a while. Carter nodded, then looked back at Velith. You're safe here. Just get some sleep. Safe. She wasn't sure if she believed that. But as exhaustion weighed down on her, she let her eyes close. For now, she would rest. And for the first time in her life, she wondered, maybe humans weren't the monsters she had always thought they were. Velith woke up to the soft hum of the human ship. The air smelled strange, like metal, oil, and something warm. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then, the memories rushed back. The battlefield. The pain. The humans. She opened her eyes carefully. The room was small and plain, nothing like the elegant, shining halls of a Xilari vessel. Instead of smooth crystal walls, everything was made of rough metal, covered in buttons and screens. It felt primitive. She shifted slightly and winced. Her leg was wrapped in some strange material, but the pain was gone. The humans had healed her. A soft beep caught her attention. She turned her head and saw Carter sitting near the door, reading something on a small glowing device. His armor was gone, replaced by a simple dark uniform. He noticed her movement and looked up. You're awake. Velith hesitated, then gave a small nod. Carter stood and walked over. How's the leg? She frowned. No Xilari would ever ask such a question. Weakness was shameful, something to be ignored, not discussed. Better, she said cautiously. Good, Carter said. He tapped a button on the wall, and the door slid open. You hungry? Velith blinked in confusion. Hungry? Carter smirked. Yeah, you know, food. Food. Of course, she knew what food was. But why was he offering it to her? Xilari soldiers only ate when it was necessary, and no one ever offered food. Everyone took care of themselves. But before she could reply, Carter had already stepped out. A moment later, he returned with a tray. Velith eyed it suspiciously. The tray held a bowl filled with some kind of steaming liquid, along with a small round object. Carter placed the tray on a table next to her. It's soup, easy to eat, and bread. Velith hesitated. Could she even eat human food? Xilari biology was different. If she ate the wrong thing, it could poison her. As if reading her thoughts, Carter tore off a small piece of bread and popped it into his mouth. See, perfectly safe. Velith studied him. Was this a trick? Some kind of test? Her stomach growled. Annoyed at her own weakness, she slowly reached for the bread. It felt rough in her fingers, nothing like the smooth energy cubes she usually ate. She took a careful bite. Her eyes widened. It was warm, soft. It had a strange, rich flavor, something she had never tasted before. SciFi food was always efficient, designed for pure nutrition. But this had taste. She looked up and found Carter watching her with amusement. "Good?" he asked. Velith hesitated, then gave a small nod. Carter chuckled. "You should try the soup." She picked up the spoon, unsure how to use it at first. SciFi ate with small energy utensils, not metal tools. But she copied Carter's movements and lifted the spoon to her mouth. The warmth spread through her. It was comforting in a way she had never known. For a moment, she forgot she was surrounded by humans. For a moment, she wasn't an abandoned SciFi. She was just a person eating food. Carter leaned back. "You don't talk much, do you?" Velith lowered the spoon. "My people do not waste words." "Figures." Carter smirked. "Humans, we talk a lot. You'll get used to it." "Will I?" Velith wasn't sure, but as she took another bite, she realized something strange. Maybe, just maybe, humans weren't as savage as she had been told. Velith had never felt this way before. It was a strange sensation, sitting among humans, listening to their voices, watching them move. It was different from how her own people behaved. Louder, more chaotic, yet somehow alive. She had been on the human ship for 2 days now. In that time, no one had harmed her. No one had locked her up or treated her like an enemy. Instead, they had given her food, treated her wounds, and even spoken to her like she mattered. It was unsettling. Now she sat in the corner of the ship's common area, watching the human soldiers as they talked and laughed with each other. They were so relaxed, as if they did not fear war, did not fear death. Carter sat across from her, fixing a piece of his armor. He glanced at her. "You always this quiet?" Velith hesitated. "SciFi do not speak without purpose." Carter smirked. "Well, humans talk even when there isn't a purpose." He gestured to the others in the room. "See, we joke, we argue, we laugh." Velith frowned slightly. "Laughter is not necessary." "Maybe not," Carter agreed, "but it makes life better." Velith did not understand. SciFi were efficient, logical. There was no room for distractions. Yet these humans enjoyed their distractions. Her eyes wandered to a soldier sitting nearby, a young man playing with a small, cube-shaped device. The lights on it flickered as he pressed different sides. Curious, she tilted her head. "What is that?" The soldier looked up, surprised that she had spoken. "Oh, it's just a puzzle cube. You solve it by getting all the colors to match." He twisted it, and the colors shifted. "It's just for fun." Fun. The word felt strange on her tongue. Carter chuckled. "You really don't have fun, do you?" Velith hesitated. SciFi do not waste time on useless activities. A soldier across the room snorted. "Sounds boring." Velith stiffened. Boring. SciFi were not boring. They were advanced, intelligent. But before she could respond, Carter leaned forward. "So what do SciFi do when they're not fighting?" Velith paused. "We study, train, improve ourselves." Carter raised an eyebrow. "That's it." She gave a small nod. Carter sighed. "No music? No games? No stories?" "Stories are for the weak," Velith replied. At that, the entire room went silent. The humans exchanged looks, as if she had said something ridiculous. Then Carter smirked. "You know, if stories are for the weak, then humans must be the weakest species in the galaxy." A ripple of laughter passed through the room. Velith blinked in confusion. He was not offended. He was amused. Carter leaned back. "Stories are important. They teach us, they give us hope." He glanced at her. "Even warriors need hope." Velith was unsure how to respond. Hope. That was not something the Xilari believed in. They relied on strength, not hope. But humans, they fought because they believed in something. Carter stood up and stretched. Come on. You've been sitting here all day. Let's go for a walk. Velith hesitated but slowly stood. As she followed Carter through the ship, she realized something. The humans were not just soldiers. They were people. And for the first time, she wondered, was she becoming one of them? Velith walked beside Carter through the long metal corridors of the human ship. The hum of the engines vibrated beneath her feet. Everything here felt so crude. The walls, the lights, the way the ship rumbled every time it adjusted course. Xilari ships were silent, perfect, efficient. And yet, this place felt alive. Carter glanced at her, leg holding up. Velith nodded. The human medical treatment was surprisingly effective. She could move without much pain now, though she still felt weak. It frustrated her. Carter led her to a large open space inside the ship, a training area. There were humans practicing hand-to-hand combat, lifting heavy objects, and running through agility drills. The air smelled of sweat and effort. Velith frowned. You train like this? Carter smirked. How else do you think we fight? She had seen humans fight before, on the battlefield. They were relentless. But this training looked messy. There was no perfect form, no synchronized movement like the Xilari. Humans fought like they lived, with chaos, emotion, and instinct. Carter stepped onto a mat and stretched. You probably have combat training, right? Velith straightened. Of course. Good, Carter grinned. Show me. Velith hesitated. Was this some kind of test? A trick? But Carter just stood there, relaxed, waiting. Taking a breath, she stepped onto the mat. Her body was still weak, but she could fight. Xilari were trained from a young age to be warriors. Her movements were precise, controlled. Carter raised his hands. Come at me. She narrowed her eyes, then lunged. Carter dodged. His movements were different from Xilari combat, more reactive, less structured. He didn't follow a set pattern, didn't move the way she expected. She attacked again, this time aiming for his side. He blocked, twisting her arm slightly, forcing her off balance. She stumbled but caught herself. Carter smirked. Not bad, but you're holding back. Velith gritted her teeth. I am injured. Yeah, he said, stepping back. But that's not the only reason. She froze. He was right. She was holding back. Not because of her injuries, not because she was weak. Because something inside her was changing. For the first time in her life, she wasn't fighting to prove herself. She wasn't fighting to survive. She wasn't fighting at all. She was learning. Carter crossed his arms. Your style is good, precise, but too rigid. You expect your opponent to follow the rules. He grinned. Humans don't do rules. Velith exhaled slowly. She had been taught that strength came from perfection, from discipline. But these humans, their strength was different. It came from something else. Again, she said. Carter's grin widened. That's the spirit. They trained for a while longer, and with each exchange, Velith began to see it, the way humans adapted, the way they turned weakness into strength. Maybe, just maybe, she could do the same. Velith sat quietly in the corner of the human mess hall, watching the soldiers around her. The room was filled with laughter and voices, the clatter of metal trays, and the smell of strange human food. The atmosphere was relaxed, almost casual. It was so different from how Xilari soldiers behaved. Her people were always disciplined, always focused. There was no room for distractions like this. And yet, humans won wars. They were not the strongest, not the most advanced, but they were survivors. Somehow, their chaotic, emotional nature worked. Carter sat down across from her, placing a tray of food on the table. You know, you don't have to sit in the corner like some kind of ghost. Velith glanced at him. "I do not belong here." Carter scoffed. "Says who?" She hesitated. "My people." Carter leaned back, arms crossed. "Well, your people left you behind. We didn't." The words hit harder than she expected. He wasn't wrong. The HFY had abandoned her without hesitation. She had been wounded, weak, useless. And in HFY culture, the weak were left behind. She clenched her fists. Carter studied her for a moment, then sighed. "Look, I get it. Trusting us isn't easy. But you're here now. And whether you like it or not, we look after our own." She frowned. "I am not one of you." Carter smirked. "Not yet." Before she could respond, a loud alarm echoed through the ship. Instantly, the room shifted. Soldiers jumped up, voices sharp, movements quick. The laughter and relaxation were gone in an instant. Velith's heart pounded. She recognized that sound. An attack. Carter grabbed his helmet. "Stay here." Velith stood. "No." Carter raised an eyebrow. "No." She stepped forward, determination in her voice. "I will fight." He studied her for a moment, then grinned. "All right then, alien girl. Let's see what you've got." As the ship rumbled and the soldiers rushed to battle stations, Velith felt something stir inside her. This time, she wasn't fighting alone. This time, she would not be left behind. The ship shook violently as explosions rumbled in the distance. The enemy was attacking fast, with no warning. Red emergency lights flashed across the halls as human soldiers rushed to their battle stations. Velith moved with them. For the first time, she was not an outsider watching from the shadows. She was part of the fight. Carter ran beside her, checking his weapon. "Looks like raiders. Probably think we're an easy target." Velith frowned. "Are they mistaken?" Carter smirked. "Oh yeah. They're about to have a very bad day." They reached the armory, where soldiers grabbed weapons and armor. Velith hesitated. HFY warriors used advanced plasma rifles, sleek and precise. Human weapons were bulkier, heavier, messy. Carter handed her a rifle. "You know how to use this." She studied the weapon. "It is simple enough." "Good," Carter said, locking his helmet in place. "Then let's go." They moved toward the hangar bay, where enemy forces had begun boarding. The moment the doors opened, chaos erupted. Gunfire flashed. Explosions shook the ground. Shouts and orders filled the air. Velith took cover behind a crate. The enemy soldiers were heavily armed, but unorganized. She analyzed their movements quickly. Their attack pattern was aggressive but reckless. Weakness. Velith's training kicked in. She aimed, fired. One enemy down. Another rushed forward, and she moved fast, rolling to the side before landing a perfect shot. Carter whistled. "Not bad, alien girl." She didn't reply. She was focused, efficient. A human soldier next to her was pinned down, trapped by incoming fire. Without thinking, Velith sprinted forward, sliding across the floor and pulling him out of the way just before a blast struck the spot where he had been. The soldier gasped. "Thanks." She didn't understand why, but something in her chest warmed. She was fighting with them, not against them. As the battle raged, Velith realized something. HFY always fought for their own survival, for victory, for glory. But humans, they fought for each other. And so, for the first time in her life, she made a choice. She wasn't fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for them. And she would not let them fall. Velith moved like a shadow through the chaos. The battle inside the human ship was fierce, but she had fought in worse. The enemy raiders were fast, reckless, but not as disciplined as the HFY, and certainly not as determined as the humans. She took cover behind a metal crate, her borrowed rifle hot in her hands. Across the hangar bay, Carter ducked behind a barrier, exchanging fire with the raiders. His voice crackled through the communicator. "We need to push them back before they reach the reactor bay." Velith analyzed the battlefield. The raiders were strong in numbers, but disorganized. They weren't expecting resistance this fierce. If they could break their formation, they could drive them out. "I see a weak point," she said through the comms. "Their left flank is exposed." Carter glanced in that direction. "You sure?" "I do not speak without purpose," she replied. Carter grinned. "All right then, alien girl. Let's make him regret this." Before she could respond, he was already moving. He signaled a few soldiers and charged toward the weak spot. Velith followed, covering him with precise shots. The raiders panicked. They weren't expecting an attack from their side. Within moments, their formation crumbled. A raider lunged at her with a blade. She ducked, spun, and struck him hard in the chest with the butt of her rifle. He stumbled, and she finished him with a swift shot. The Xilari had taught her how to be efficient, but the humans had taught her how to be ruthless. She looked around. The tide of battle was shifting. The humans fought with fierce determination, covering each other, protecting the wounded. They weren't just soldiers. They were a unit, a family, a concept she had never truly understood. A loud explosion rocked the ship. Smoke filled the air. A voice shouted through the comms. "They've planted a charge. Reactor Bay is compromised." Velith's blood ran cold. If the reactor was destroyed, the entire ship would be lost. Carter cursed. "We need to stop them now." Without hesitation, Velith turned. "Then let's move." Carter didn't question her. He just nodded. They were no longer just allies in battle. They were fighting as one. The ship trembled as another explosion rocked the halls. The raiders were desperate now, fighting harder, but Velith knew they were losing. The humans had turned the tide. But if the reactor exploded, none of that would matter. Carter sprinted through the smoke-filled corridors, his weapon ready. Velith followed, her mind sharp, her heart pounding. Every instinct told her to survive, to escape. That was the Xilari way, but she ignored it. The humans had taught her something else. She wasn't running away. She was running toward the danger. They'd reached the reactor bay. The massive core pulsed with energy, surrounded by pipes and control panels. And near the center, a blinking red device was attached to the reactor. A bomb. 3 raiders guarded it. One of them saw them and shouted, "They're here. Stop them." Gunfire erupted. Velith moved fast, dodging behind a console. Carter returned fire, taking one down instantly. The second raider charged at him, but Velith intercepted, twisting his weapon aside and delivering a sharp blow to his throat. He collapsed. Only one remained, the one holding the detonator. "Stay back," he growled, his finger hovering over the trigger. "One step closer, and I blow this whole ship apart." Carter raised his rifle, but Velith knew he wouldn't be fast enough. So she did the only thing she could. She charged. The raider's eyes widened as she moved. He pressed the detonator. Nothing happened. Velith struck him hard, knocking him to the floor. Carter rushed forward and secured the detonator. Velith exhaled sharply. "The bomb. Can you disarm it?" Carter knelt beside it, examining the wires. "I can try." Velith wasn't an engineer, but she had studied enough war tactics to understand explosives. She crouched beside him. "This wire. It links to the charge." Carter nodded. "So if we cut it." The ship lurched violently. A warning siren blared overhead. "Reactor overload imminent." Velith's pulse quickened. They were running out of time. Carter hesitated. "If I cut the wrong wire?" Velith grabbed his hand, steadying him. "Trust yourself." He glanced at her, then nodded. With a deep breath, he cut the wire. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the blinking red light on the bomb flickered and died. The ship fell silent. The siren stopped. They had won. Carter let out a shaky laugh. "Damn, that was close." Velith stood, her body still tense. The battle was over. The ship was safe. And yet, something felt different. Carter clapped her shoulder. "Not bad, alien girl." She looked at him, then at the humans around her, cheering, helping the wounded, standing together. For the first time in her life, Velith understood what it meant to belong. The Xilari had abandoned her. The humans had saved her. And now she knew where she truly stood. Not as a warrior of the Xilari, but as a soldier among humans.